Hello and welcome to Tim's BMW repairs and information. Yeah, we're indoors in the warm and that's because it's -2 at the moment. And we've got two proper jobs for you on the E31 or any car with the V8, the M60 or the M62. Both the jobs are relevant to those. I've done this job a few times on the E32 and the E38s. It's a lot harder on the E31 because the bonnet is so long. In fact, there's a lot of car before you actually reach the engine because they're sort of trying to head towards a mid-engined car with the E31. Anyway, yeah, two jobs. First one is thermostat, and I'll chat about that in a minute. The second one is the Serpentine belt tensioner. Now, what got me onto the Serpentine belt tensioner was that I was worried I had the chain guides failing, the timing chain guides failing on my V8. But I was very lucky to find out that it wasn't the chain guides, because I've always said if you change the oil every year, you're not going to have any problem with the chain guides. Oh, obviously, you can change the tensioner as well. And yeah, I'm still holding to that at 190,000 miles. Chain guides are fine. And what it was one of the bearings on one of the Serpentine belt tensioners. And out it comes. There we go. That's a complete thing with the damper on it. Oh yeah, that's a goner. Sounds like a Scalextric's motor. The main one for the alternator and the power steering and the fan and the water pump and all the rest of it. One of those was failing. So, okay, no problem. We're going to do that next week. So I'm going to do both of these jobs, but send out the next one next week because they're very long videos and they shouldn't be. I've done the Serpentine belt tensioner on the E38, very easy, and it's on MeekNet if you want to look at that. On the E31, a lot harder because it's trying to be a mid-engine car and you have to contort yourself over the bonnet and the radiator and the cowling for the radiators and all the rest of it to get to it. Same is true for the other one, which is the thermostat. Now, the last MOT I had, which was after the accident, the MOT station said to me, you're very, very close to failing on hydrocarbons on the MOT test, so the lambda sensor tests. And he said probably the reason for that is your catalytic converters are failing. And I thought, yeah, that's not unlikely because it was about 10 years ago. I took the car to Matt Dennis, have the 200 cell catalytic converters fitted, the sports ones, X-pipe fitted and all the rest of it. Makes a car go a lot faster. But of course, 200 cell cats don't last as long. So I thought, yeah, it's probably that. But then I remembered around that time, my temperature gauge wasn't sitting in the middle. Now, with all early BMWs, up until they stopped using a coolant temperature gauge, it should sit bang in the centre at 12 o'clock. And if it doesn't, there's something quite horribly wrong. Now, they're buffered temperature gauges, which means that they start at about 50 degrees down here, and as they move up, you reach about 70 degrees at this point here, and then about 75 as it hits the middle, even with a 95 or 108 degree stat, and it will sit in the middle as it goes through 85, 90, 95, 100, and about 110 degrees it will start moving off the centre again. So you've got a long way to go between about 75 and about 120 degrees. It will just sit bang in the middle. Once you start overheating 115, 120 degrees, then it will start going towards the red. But if it's just slightly off the 12 o'clock position towards the cold, then your coolant's very cold. Yeah, very cold indeed. Yeah, you're talking about 70 degrees, 75 degrees. Now, at those sort of temperatures, the DME will still be putting in extra fuel because it thinks the engine's cold. And that could be a reason we're so close to not passing the MOT. Just a tiny bit off on the HCs, on the hydrocarbons. So I'm hoping that's the case because the MOT runs out in 2 days, so I've got to sort it out. Okie doke, so as always, I've done both the jobs. More or less killed me, basically, with the long bonnet on the E31. It's not a difficult job, but it's very fiddly on the E31. Same for the E32, it's in exactly the same place, same thermostat. E38s, E39s, Then we move, on the later years, we move over to the temperature mapped thermostat, but the bolts are all the same pattern, all the rest of it. And I'm not sure, I didn't do the thermostat on the E38, the late ones. I did it on the early ones and the E31 and the E32, probably about 15 years ago. So it's a long time ago. Okay, so the job is simple, but very difficult to do because you're in a contorted position. And because I was contorted all the way through the job itself, it's very difficult to video it, even with my lovely Action 5 Osmo from DJI, which is fantastic camera, excellent camera that one is, and you can get it into places. So what I think I'll do is that we'll just go through the routines. We've got to take quite a lot of bits off. Right, let's have a quick look at where the thermostat is on the 840. It's right down there. You can just see the bolts on it. Let's move the fan out of the way. Just there, so it's right underneath the secondary throttle butterfly. However, we can get to the bolts from this side. That one, no problem. One above it, no problem. Then we've got one hidden right down there and one behind the dipstick tube and things like that. So you can see that one. That's him just down there. To get to the thermostat to start with, the air filter cover and the MAF and the boot, that all has to come off. Next stage is we'll remove filter, MAF and the boot. That'll give us a bit of space to get to the thermostat. Right, let's start with the filter cover. There's a number of clips around it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That clip's decided to just fall off. They do that sometimes. That one's off without falling off. That's very kind of it. Right, make sure that's all loose. Good. Disconnect the MAF. And then we're going to disconnect it. Well, might as well disconnect it over here. Now these haven't been off for quite a few years, so it'd be interesting to see which bit feels more like wanting to come off. We could take it from the idle control valve, and then probably have to get a Jubilee clip undone from that. There we go, that'll do. There we go, we're there at last. Right, so, oh yeah, of course there's a clip at the bottom of these. It holds on a cable. There we go, that's that all off. Now, I also removed the viscous coupled fan in the usual way with a big spanner and a hammer, not using the holding tool or anything like that, and we'll go through how that's done. We're going to knock that off with the spanner in the usual way. There's a couple of bolts get in the way of my spanner, so we'll have to bash those off with, I think they're 10mm. Might be. Yeah, I've got to remove 2 of the bolts because there's one. Spanner's just so wide that it doesn't fit in there without removing a couple of them. There we go, they're coming loose. Right, next stage, protect things with a dust sheet so when I hit the spanner it doesn't clout everything. And then it usually takes 1 or 2 goes. Side of the spanner, the side of the hammer, side of the spanner. Real sharp dink. There we go, he's off. Took more hitting than normal. That's probably because it hasn't been off for about 5 years. So now we can just rotate the fan clockwise direction when viewed from the front. Don't drop it and store it the same way up as it is at the moment, on its side if you like. And he's off. And it's just a case of getting him out. They do come out, but don't force them. She will damage the fan blades. Spin him round a bit. What's he stuck on? Oh, he's stuck on there. There we go. One out. Now, that gave me a bit more room, and it's always best to do that anyway. You don't want to snap one of the blades off the Viscous coupled fan. They're not the strongest things in the world, so it's always best to get that out of the way. It would have been a lot easier, well, slightly easier at least, to remove the fan cowling, which I did in the end when I was refitting the Serpentine belt, which was in next week's video, because I just couldn't see what I was doing. Coupled with the fact it was 3:30 and getting dark, that didn't help either. So anyway, the thermostat, we remove a few bits and bobs to get to it. Two of the bolts, really easy to get to, and what I use is a small socket set, and the reason for that is they're quite weak screws. Now if you use a big socket set on it and you give it a good heave, you're going to snap the bolt in half. It's absolutely sure to happen. So always the best thing to do with those small thermostat bolts, and the water pump, in fact, the same with that, is to lubricate all the bolts. With the thermostat, you can get behind the bolts because they're not blind, they pop out the other side. Right, bit of WD-40 on the bolts, on the bolt heads, and behind the bolts as well. Really can't see what I'm doing there. Behind the threads as well, so you can see the back of the threads here. It's quite handy, you can get to at least a couple of them. Third one, not so easy. You just about see it. So I can lubricate the threads themselves, and that helps a lot. And then leave the penetrating fluid to get into those before you try to take them off. And use a small socket set, because you can only put enough effort into that to undo them and not to snap them. So that's a good tip for you, use a small socket set. Okay, two of the bolts, easy to get to. Oh yeah, forgot, you've got to obviously disconnect the top hose, and that means losing quite a bit of fluid. Now on the E31, because I wasn't sure I was going to get it done in a day, because the days are so short here, I didn't prop it up on the drive on the ramps, because I have to have it hanging out half over the road to do that. Didn't want to do that. That meant I couldn't put the catch tray underneath the car either. So in these situations, you must run a hose under the car to dilute any coolant that comes out, so cats and dogs are attracted to it and it's highly poisonous to them. So if you haven't got a catch tray that's going to fit under, and I didn't have any that was going to fit under the car, put the hose pipe underneath it, water going through, your feet get cold after a while, but at least it washes away the coolant. You lose about 1 litre and possibly 1.5 litres at the very most. Lovely blue coolant to refill it. Anyway, yeah, disconnect the top hose, get that out of the way, and then move on to the bolts. Two of them easy, two at the back, damn awkward to get to. So you have to use a universal joint. And even with the universal joint, what you come up against is as the bolt comes out, it heads towards the bank one, the V of the head, and your socket's going to start to hit it. So you can use the shortest socket you can find to do it, and a universal joint. And really it's just a case of fiddling about, and I probably took about an hour to get those two bolts out. It really was quite a hard job, especially on your back when you're leaning over it, over that long front cowling. Yeah, not much fun. New thermostat. Have I got the old one here? No, I haven't got the old one here. You get, with your new thermostat, you get the thermostat, you get a nice big O-ring, and you get a bit of drain pipe. And I'm going to show you what the bit of drain pipe's for. It's for removing the old one and fitting the new one. It doesn't make any sense. And I looked at it, and this grey bit of drain pipe, no, I don't know what's going on here. So yeah, I'll show you what the drain pipe's for, and it's quite useful.
Righty-ho, you may wonder why you get a drain pipe with them. That's so you can twist them out, push them down, twist it, and out it comes. Simple as that.
Also, when you take out the old thermostat, also you'll find, of course, the thermostat housing is sort of adhered to the water pump and you have to give it a bit of a clout. I couldn't get a nylon hammer in there, so I used a hammer and going on to the bit where the top pipe goes, the lower hose goes onto it, and that got it off fine.
There we go, he's out. And a lot of coolant too. Right, yeah, good thing I kept the water going, I think.
Anyway, yeah, problem with the thermostat in my car, obviously it was opening too early. Was it opening too early or was it leaking? It's difficult to say. The front O-ring had failed. Now it has a tiny little nose O-ring on it, and you'll see me look at it in the video. The old one has to come out of the thermostat housing because you have to reuse that. And it doesn't look like an O-ring anymore. It looks just like a sort of V-shaped thing, and you're not sure if it's part of the housing or what, but it is a squashed O-ring, so that has to come out.
Got an O-ring at the bottom of it. Old one hasn't, so I'm guessing the O-ring's still in there. Certainly feels like something's down the bottom of that. That's definitely a seat. Yeah, I don't think that's anything metal there. Is that metal? That is rubbery, that is. So that is the old O-ring. There we go, he's out. Right, old O-ring out. New device in. Does it go in any better this time? Oh yeah, it does as well. Right, getting more or less the right position. Drain pipe attachment. Squash it, twist it, and let it both ends click into position. Be careful you don't scratch the sealing surface. There we go, it's the old one out. And we'll put some grease on that, silicone grease. Right, one greased O-ring. Plop him in. Grease helps hold it in position as well, so it doesn't pop back out again immediately. Although this one's having a good old go at doing that. There we go, he's settled in a bit better now. He's got a goiter there. Right. O-ring in position, no gritty bits on the surface. Stop it going in. There we go.
New one in, drain pipe and all the rest of it, and then spend another hour putting it back in place. Oh, don't forget, of course, fit the new O-ring. Heavily grease it with silicone grease because it has to hold in place. If you don't grease it, it's going to fall out as you try and offer it up. So lots of grease just to keep it in place. Always best to lubricate O-rings no matter what their size is anyway. You can use engine oil, but it's just a bit too thin for this job. So silicone grease, DC4 is the stuff I use, or Service-Sol is another good one. That's quite sticky and it'll hold the O-ring in place as you offer it up because it's going to take a little while. You can get the first two bolts done up before you have to worry about the back ones. So that will hold the O-ring in, so that's not a problem.
Righty-ho. New thermostat in, greased up O-ring. We can at least get one of the bolts in quite easily. Get him in position. I'm like absolutely sure the O-ring hasn't popped back out again, because that would be a real pain in the neck. Right, bolts are all the same length. It slides away around quite a lot in there. Removing and checking for O-ring. Okay. Right, get one of the bolts in. If I could see what I was doing, it'd help.
And then, yeah, it's just a case of doing up the 4 bolts, refitting the top hose, and then refitting all the air filter cover and the pipe and all the rest of it. Lovely job done. Bleed the system, and I go through how to do the bleeding. If you have any problems bleeding, then here's the link to advanced bleeding techniques which I use on all my cars. Never have a problem with overheating after bleeding, no problems at all. I didn't use that method on this one because I couldn't get the nose of the car up, because I couldn't get the ramps under, etc, etc. So I used a different method, which is to fill up the expansion tank right to the top and keep squashing the top hose. And as you squash it, the little float slowly drops, and then you fill it up to the brim again and do the same again. It drops and drops and drops. And then when you've got enough coolant in the expansion tank, then start the car up.
Right, all okay. All on, MAF on, boot in, secure, fan belt, serpentine belt on, not obstructed. Right, let's give it a go. Well, it certainly sounds a lot better without the bearing rattling away. Fans on okay. Yeah, everything working okay there.
And first thing that will happen is it will slurp all the coolant out of the expansion tank through the heater system. Obviously got to have the heater on full temperature, and that will open up the heater valves. Yeah, the coolant goes through that, empties the expansion tank again, so you've got to fill it up. Anyway, if you've got any problems, advanced bleeding technique there. No problem at all. Now, there's one bit that I thought of when I was halfway through. Wouldn't it be easier to get the secondary throttle butterfly off? Because that's right above where the thermostat is, and it would have given me a bit more room. Problem is those Torx on there, they're done up so tight. And also you can't get a Torx bit in there without removing the temperature gauge, the temperature sensor, which is on the water pump. And I had a quick look at it, and there's 3 bolts. One of them's difficult to access, 2 of them are okay, but things are in the way. I thought, no, I'd have to replace the O-ring in it as well, and I hadn't got one because I hadn't sort of planned for it. So yeah, it would have been easier with the secondary throttle butterfly off. Not a problem with the later E38s, of course they don't have one. But the M60 and M62 on most versions have the secondary throttle body right above the thermostat. Anyway, didn't do it, managed to do it quite okay. Yep, and then just for a quick test drive, make sure everything's all right. Very enjoyable. Got 2 abreast here and a fire engine. How's that going to go? That's going to go really bad. Yeah, that wasn't going to go well, whichever way you look at it. Temperature gauge in the middle. Now, so these sort of conditions, 5th gear, cruising on a cold day, and then the temperature gauge would just start to droop if it ever reached the middle in the first place. But we're looking okay this time. Yeah, bang in the centre. Right, so next thing, book an MOT. Then we'll find out if it's the cats, or was it just because it's running too cold. My guess is it's probably a bit of both, I should think. I haven't driven the E31 much because of the temperature problem, but it's a joy to drive the E31 again. It's just so powerful. It's just got that torque to it. Whereas the Z4, fantastic fun, more fun I should think than the E31. You'll know when we start accelerating. Blimey, excuse my language. Oh, for goodness sake. That is truly impressive, it really is. But you really have to push it. You have to get the revs up to about 6,000 or 7,000 RPM before it gets going. Whereas the E31, yeah, 3,000 RPM, it's just going to pull your neck off. So good fun. Anyway, put the thumbs up if that helped you. Yeah, next week we're doing the Serpentine belt. I did it over 2 days, the thermostat and then the Serpentine belt tensioner, just because of the short days here. Serpentine belt one, quite a lot easier with the cowling removed, as well as the viscous fan. That gives you oodles of room and it's quite easy. I tried to do it with the fan cowling in. Yeah, shouldn't have done that. Removed it right at the end to get the Serpentine belt back on again. Would have been a lot easier. Anyway, thumbs up if that helped. Keep commenting. Love the comments. Even the ones on the alloy one, which weren't that great, to be honest, but I don't mind. Keep them coming. I'm always happy to receive comments, positive or negative, doesn't matter. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.